I think it's very much about the minority and the suppressed. And in particular in this story, it's about the control the Catholic Church had on the masses during that time through language and interpretation. And I think if anything's relevant, it shows that you can't keep man down and you can't control, and sooner or later he will gain knowledge, and through the knowledge, power to be liberated, freedom of conscience. As an actor, I'm sure most actors look at their characters and try to identify, at least sympathize 100% in order to understand and be believable. So that would be my approach. I live in a very different time than Martin, but I can still try to draw parallels, and I think that's really the challenge of this project, is to bring it into a modern context. I tried to play Martin with doubt as much as knowing what's right, which I think that's a very human condition, even with those who are driven 100%, are pursued with doubt. And here's a man, he's a genius, invented a lot of the German language, and brought Rome down, and yet I like the idea that he's still human and pursued by doubt. So if I was to draw any trait, it would probably be doubt. It's always a challenge. It's a huge challenge with anything that is historical, to make it contemporary, make it speak to a contemporary audience. I read this script and I saw it as a modern piece. I didn't really see it as characters living 500 years ago. Of course, that's essentially what it is, but there's a modern umbilical cord which ties us to Martin. Working with Peter, I was very fortunate to work with him because he's in the film, although I don't share much, if any, screen time with him. But I was fortunate enough that we both challenged the production to at least let us as characters meet, and we did in one scene. So it was great to work with him on and off, and he's incredible and really an institution, a walking institution, and razor sharp. His wit is razor sharp, and he's just brilliant to listen to.
It's like asking a hunter how he approached a bear. He now has the bear on the wall, or some other hideous place, but so he managed to track it down. But exactly the steps he took, I can't really remember, except it's all there really in the text. And his relationship with Luther is terribly important. And at the beginning there was no scene between him and Luther, which seemed improbable to me because they lived in the same state and one protected the other. Why should he protect him if he didn't know him somewhat? And many authorities said there was no evidence they ever met. But then there's no evidence that most people meet. Luther was too good a Catholic to remain a Catholic. In other words, he was so critical of some of the habits of the clergy, especially taking money from people, superstitious people who thought they were getting an automatic transport into heaven because they made a financial contribution to the church. He suddenly was absolutely scandalized by this commercialization. It's a finger of warning to commercialization everywhere, because he took action against it and started the Reformation. I want to congratulate the costume people and the set designers of creating a world which is absolutely fantastic to look at. At the same time, because of their accuracy, I understood why many people died at the age of 40, because the costumes, you're dressed really in curtains. in Gardinen, in curtains from a rich establishment, and the costumes pull you in all the wrong places. You find yourself really neckless and not knowing how to move, and that's the penalty of being entirely accurate. I thought he was terrific. I enjoyed that enormously. I enjoyed the encounter because we had many variations of tempo and of feeling in that encounter. Very short encounter, but it was a very interesting scene to play. I thought at first he was a burglar. I thought it was an assassination attempt, which any king at that time might have felt, especially with papal authorities around who were completely unscrupulous. Then it changed its mood the whole time. It was wonderfully complicated to play.
For me, reading about their family life and realising that these people are incredibly modern people, and she's an incredibly modern woman. I mean, she was married, she had children, she held down several jobs. So reading about that gives you a real sense of who she is. And the kind of, she's very self-possessed, and I think when you read the material you have a sense of that, so you can bring that to the scene, you know. Originally their marriage was not really a romantic, our romantic idea of marriage. I don't think it began with them falling passionately in love. I think they decided to go on a journey together because they kind of recognised each other, and it was a profession, a vocation that they took on that actually eventually grew into love. And there's some really lovely letters where, you know, they had a wonderfully long, rich marriage that grew into love. He really cares about what he does, and he works really hard. And I don't know whether because he's done lots of theatre, he works he doesn't decide what he's going to do. So even though he has this huge role, and I arrive and I have a few scenes, he really takes the time to kind of work on what happens on the day. So he doesn't kind of isolate himself. He's very much part of the company, and I think that's the best way to work. So, and he allows himself to be very vulnerable, and he's great to work with. He's lovely. He's very easygoing.
But it's a great story, you know. This is the whole story about Martin Luther is really fascinating. It's one of those stories that is always, however many times it's told, it can always be told again because it has so much of interest. He seems to be perhaps the villain of the piece, but what I liked about him was that he was a man who was so convinced that he was right, so committed to his belief, and not doing it for any personal gain. He was going around the country raising money for St. Peter's Church in Rome, and he wasn't taking any of it for himself. He was living he was absolutely committed to what he thought was right. I started watching the sort of the Christian conservative religious channels on television in America, those preachers and people on TV, and just looking at the way they spoke about. I mean, these people have very, very fundamental beliefs. Whether one agrees with them or not is a whole other issue, but they are completely committed to what they believe, and that commitment gives you a certain kind of energy when you're talking about what you believe in. And so that's what I was looking at. That's what I was trying to find.